Familials is something that most of you, I don't know what all of your businesses are, but that most people can participate in, and something that WMDL and TEQ run all the time. It's very important to have a good relationship with WMDL, because if Tourism Australia are running a famil or Tourism and Events Queensland are running a famil, they are going to go to WMDL and ask them for their advice on how to put together the itinerary, who are the best operators for whatever the angle is that the journalist is doing, or whatever, or if it's, you know, trade or whatever. So it's important that WMDL is kept up with what's happening in your business. Again, to use the Segway tours as an example, I helped them put together a document with all different story angles. So it was like a 2 or 3 page document that said, this is how the Segway tours appeals to families, this is how it appeals to couples, this is how it appeals to corporate groups. This is why it's good in rainy weather, it's good in sunny weather, it's good for nature lovers. And I wrote a little paragraph on each of those angles, and we gave that to Tourism and Events Queensland, so that if they're doing a famil, they go, oh great, yeah, okay, so the Segways were good for families for whatever reason. And so it's something that they have on hand ready to go. And then I also did a back page on, here's the basic ways that you need to be able to coordinate the Segways into a famil itinerary. So there's a morning one which leaves at this time and gets back at this time. This is what it includes, so that they know all that information. It saves them time, and it's just nice and easy for them to go, yep, great, bang, put it in the itinerary, done. And then obviously you get the resulting exposure from that. You need to be willing to offer the product at no charge if you're in a position to do that, or consider what kind of reasonable cost. I think it makes you more attractive to WMDL or TEQ if you can offer it at no charge. But if you've got hard costs that you need to cover, then think about what can you offer them that just covers your costs, but so that you still get included, because they do have budget for famils. And I think it's vital to host them, even if you just meet them at the beginning or meet them at the end. But I think it's really important to have that personal contact. That will not only give you a better outcome from that particular famil, but it helps you build a relationship with those tourism organisations as well, because they know they can rely on you. They don't want, I've heard horror stories from other regions where people turn up for famils and nothing's been organised, there's no person there, no one knows anything about it, they don't end up going, it just looks so bad. So I think it's vital that you host for at least part of it. And lastly, on social media, we all know that it's a vital thing these days, and people get caught up on likes and how many people are liking a particular post or whatever. I count success on social media based on engagement. So if I've only got 500 followers for my flower business, but I'm happy with that because it's a small town, and how many more than 500 people are going to buy flowers in a week anyway? So I'm happy if my post reaches, say, 400 of those, and 20 of them are commenting and being involved in that and tagging their husbands and saying, you need to buy me this bunch of flowers. Or, yeah, did you know that Valentine's Day is 2 weeks away, honey? That's what I'm happy with, not so much that all 500 people saw it, because you know that the way that Facebook works, the more people that comment, the more people see it, and so on and so forth. So that's how I measure success, and so I think it's just important to not be hung up on just likes or sheer volume. It's about people engaging with your business and learning the quirky side of your business. The other thing is post content that's interesting to them, not that's a sales pitch. So you really need to think about, you can't just lift sentences from your brochure. So it needs to be stuff that's going to be of interest to them. It might leverage off what's happening in the news, that, the baby princess was born and, Vari's making special cakes, or I don't know what it might be, but...
I posted a photograph of my boss sitting on the toilet that came out of a boat, and he was sitting on the dock on the toilet, and we had something like 25 comments. Everybody just wanted to caption it. It was just ridiculous. It was really rude.
Yeah, perfect.
He just sat there on the toilet on the dock, but it was so silly, but it just worked nice.
But that also shows the character of your business as well, I think, that you are a little bit playful, and that, toilets are an interesting situation on boats, or... Yeah, so I think that's clever. That's exactly the kind of thing. And, Deb's posts on grammar, they have sparked some very interesting conversations from people who are just, really crazy about grammar. And that's good, because that's her target market. So, so for, excuse me, tips on writing your submission. There's a question about how did you identify your target markets. There's really, really good research that Tourism and Events Queensland and Tourism Australia have done. So use that in your marketing plan. Read that research and refer to it in your marketing plan, and then refer back to it in your submission. So they segment their market based on psychographics. So you might be a social fun seeker or an experience seeker or a nature lover, that kind of thing. I think that's wonderful, but I think also realistically we also need to look at geographic markets. So consider having a table where it says, okay, I've identified that I'm probably in this psychographic market, but those social fun seekers live in Mackay and they're this age, and so that's who my target market are, social fun seekers who live in Mackay, because that's realistically who my target market is. So yeah, as I've said there, consider summarising it in a table. And also consider saying who is your most important target market, who's your secondary, and who's a market. A lot of people are looking at China now that are an emerging market that may be of future interest to you. What are you doing in that market? It might only be online activity, that's all you can afford or all you know how to do. But at least you've identified that that is an area for future growth and this is what you're doing. There's a question about what is your unique selling point. So this really forces you to look at your competitors. You have to be really careful in your submission not to bag out your competitors. So try to focus on what you do and what it is that makes you good or you better or you different, that gives you a different offering, rather than saying, my competitor doesn't have toilets on their boat and I do, that makes me better. You need to look at, we've considered the comfort of our passengers and that's a high priority in our business. Use the positive language like that. I broke down for Reef Sleep what makes us unique versus our local competitors. So when I was writing Reef Sleep submission, I knew that I was competing against bareboats and other things that, are fairly unique experiences in this area. So I looked at what makes Reef Sleep different to those experiences. Then I did another row in the table that showed what makes Reef Sleep different to other Queensland or Great Barrier Reef experiences, because as just a normal traveller, I'm looking at all my options. If I want to go to the Great Barrier Reef, I don't, maybe don't care about what destination. So you need to identify why you're different or better to other Great Barrier Reef competitors, and why would someone choose you over Lady Elliot Island or going to Cairns or whatever. And then I'll talk about it later, but try to position yourself or try to think really big. Why would they choose the Whitsundays over going to Tahiti or going to Fiji or other island destinations in the world, so that you can demonstrate that you realise that you're not just competing against other people in the Whitsundays, that people are having a way bigger consideration set of where they might go for holidays and what makes you different to all those other things, what makes them ultimately choose the Whitsundays and you. So I think that's important. And describe and demonstrate the success of your innovative marketing strategy. So where I listed earlier what success looks like, add another column that says what you actually achieved. And if you exceeded that, why did you exceed that, and you're so happy about it? And if you didn't meet your KPIs, then why didn't you? Were they wrong, or did you do something wrong, and what are you going to do next year to improve it? So that's showing what you wanted to do, but also demonstrating the success or otherwise of that. I think that's it for that one. Okay, customer service is the next category. I don't know whether it's too obvious to state, but customer service has to be a main focus across all aspects of your business. In the beginning, if you could just think about documenting your policy for customer service or writing a customer service charter. We went through the Smile Whitsundays program a good few years ago now and just developed a basic charter. So if you're looking for some inspiration, then WMDL has this on file, or you can just Google it, which is what I did last night, just to give some basic customer service standards if you're looking for a template. But it's important to have a policy in place for your business, but also for the purposes of the submission, because it asks you to state what your policy on customer service is. So I think even if you can just instate a charter, I think the next important thing is to empower staff. So if you have a cancellation one day or the weather's terrible or whatever, your guests are going to be upset from the very ground level. So the staff who are dealing with them right there and then need to be able to have some power to reassure them what's going to happen next. Often the case with Cruise Whitsundays, they're out at the reef and there's no phone reception, and previously they were told, well, you just have to wait till you get back to reservations and a manager can tell us what we're allowed to give you and whether you're allowed to rebook or get a refund. They identified that that was a real problem because they then had 300 really grumpy people coming back and only 4 reservation staff to deal with those people. So they then changed their policy to empower the staff to be able to give them a standard line to reassure them, yes, you'll either be able to book on another day or get a refund. So they weren't able to process that, but at least reassure them. And so that really helped them with less grumpy people coming back. So think about, if something goes wrong, what your staff are allowed to do in order to make that problem better. And also the other way, so empower staff to be able to go over and above. So to make people really happy, what are they allowed to do? Or give them suggestions or training as to how you want service delivered to your guests. In terms of customer satisfaction, that's showing the outcome of your policy and your commitment to customer service. So I think in the submission, there's 2 parts. There's what do you want to do towards customer service and how well are you actually doing? And so unless you have systems in place to assess how well you're doing, you're not going to be able to answer that question very well, and nor are you going to be able to run your business very well because you don't know how satisfied your customers are. So if you don't do anything now, that's okay. Your thing for this year can be to do a benchmark. So you can do some sort of customer satisfaction survey, whether it's as they leave your event or as they check out or as they finish their tour or whatever. Then you do a customer satisfaction survey over a period of time and work out, what's the level of satisfaction and where are the areas that you can improve. So you then look at those areas that you can improve and implement training, and then come back in a year's time and do the same process and see whether you've improved. And even if you just do that over the course of a year, that's going to benefit your business, but it's also going to show in the submission that you have done something about improving satisfaction. You didn't know where you were starting, so what you did this year was the benchmarking study, and that's just as important, I think. Obviously, then you can also implement ongoing monitoring. So it might be that you then do customer satisfaction surveys every time, or that you start to monitor TripAdvisor and look at where you've made improvements there. You need to look at both solicited and unsolicited feedback. Unfortunately, TripAdvisor's out there and you can't do anything about it. If you're doing poorly, you can't just pretend like it's not there. So what do you do to try and improve those reviews? The submission asks what you do for customers with special needs. Now, this just isn't what you do for people in wheelchairs. So you need to think really broadly. Yes, answer about what you do with people with disabilities, but a broad range of things. It could be dietary requirements, language barriers, especially if you look at Chinese New Year. Now we have such a busy time through February, which used to be dead. What do you do for those customers that inevitably now come to Airlie Beach every year in February so that they are able to use your business and understand and have a good time? What do you do for families? What do you do for people who don't swim but they're out on a boat because they want to see Whitehaven Beach? You've got to think very broadly in this question. The other thing that I like to do is have a section on when things go wrong. So you've got all these things in place, a solid business plan and marketing and risk management plans, and everything's there, but then inevitably things go wrong. So I think it's better to say, this happened, someone started drowning at the reef. So this is what we did. And this is where our systems really were tested, and you can talk about whether that was successful or not. Hopefully, think of an example where your systems proved so solid that you then were complimented at the end because you dealt with it so well, whatever the problem was. And then also when things go right. So if you are rewarding staff for delivering that service well, and what are you doing to make sure that that culture keeps going through your business? So they're 2 sections that I like to put in. Which question is it? tell you exactly. Describe how you measure customer satisfaction and identify areas for improvement, so 4C. And 4D, which is processes you have in place to respond to customer complaints. So I think that's just a nice way of showing, yes, your business is real, things do go wrong, but this is what you do to solve them. Last year when I hosted the judge for Reef Sleep, we went out on one of those horrific days where it was 30 knots and 3-metre swells, so everybody on the boat was sick. But I actually didn't mind that because she could see what the staff do to respond to that situation. And she was so complimentary for her to be able to see that there's 20 staff with sick bags in one pocket and plastic bags in the other pocket and gloves on, and they're taking ice over to people and, you know, patting down their necks and things. She could see that, okay, this has really gone wrong. This could be a really bad day on the Great Barrier Reef, but actually these people are making their guests feel so much more comfortable, not letting it be a problem, calming them down, and seeing that people were coming up to them afterwards and saying thank you for helping them. That was a great way of showing that there are good systems in place that when the day goes really bad, the staff are onto it and that, you know, they're making the best possible day out of what could have been a really bad day. So I think it's okay to admit that things go wrong. Just show how you make it the best you can. I think I said before, consider all channels of feedback for staff satisfaction, so solicited and unsolicited. We were talking earlier about the balance of text in your submission with photos, images, graphs and so on. I like to put in screenshots from TripAdvisor. You might have a guest book that people fill in, so you know, a photo of that. People might send in a card, a handwritten card, so take a photo of that and put that in as an example of the lengths that people go to show that they were satisfied. I think that's a nice area that you can put images in. And show your improvements through the year. So I talked about tracking and monitoring satisfaction. Try to put that into a graph or some graphical format to show how you've improved over the year. Just a note on TripAdvisor. For a big business like Cruise Whitsundays that has, you know, hundreds of thousands of guests per year, they've got no chance in hell of ever being number one on TripAdvisor, let's face it. You know, a small business that can give personalised service every day is always going to have 99% positive reviews because people are personally touched by that. So instead of beating themselves up over being number 10 or whatever they are, they focus on their percentage positive reviews. So over the past year, they've seen growth from 68% positive reviews to 77%. So for them, that's a huge win. So they're realistic about how well they're going to perform on something like TripAdvisor. So they've changed what they view as success. So in that column that says what success looks like, for them it might be growth up to 80% positive over the year. So you might want to look at something like that as well, just whatever works for your business. And the last question is sustainability. It's so much better than the question last year. Last year was just a bit odd. This one's so much easier to answer this year. So it looks at contribution to the local economy. So what's your buy local and employ local policy? You might have reasons for not buying locally or reasons for buying locally. Talk about that in the submission. So you can talk about how big an impact you have on the local economy. Then the next question is engagement with the local community. So they want to see that businesses are actually a part of their community. They're not just there to rake as much money as they can out and give nothing back. So we know that everybody in the Whitsundays is so generous with donations and local causes and fundraisers and that kind of thing. So it's really important to track what you are giving because that's, you know, a big contribution to our local community, not just to help them raise money, but just to build the fabric of our community and make our community such a nice place to live. And when tourists come, they pick up on that. So it's a big contribution. Do you package with other tourism or non-tourism operators? So if you're accommodation, do you work with a restaurant, accepting that people are coming to stay and need to eat somewhere for dinner? So, you know, maybe you package with a restaurant and that is a value-added service, but it also spreads the money through the community and through the local economy. So just think about broadly all those things that you might do. And also, how do you care for the local environment? So that is the last question in the submission. Obviously, marine operators have permits that they have to adhere to. So it's important to say, we have to go through this whole rigmarole of a process in order to get a permit and just operate. So it's important to state that, but then also talk about what you do over and above that, because you understand that, you know, by caring for the environment, we're going to have a far more sustainable environment and tourism industry. Tips for answering these questions: try to quantify what you give. So try to talk to your accountant and get them to summarise all your accounts that you've paid out and sort them into businesses that are local and say, we have spent $50,000 locally with local businesses this year. So try to put a figure on it. Again, with contribution to local community, I keep a spreadsheet, you know, for my clients as to what they're giving in cash or in kind in terms of sponsorship or prize donations and that kind of thing. So you can say, we've given $5,000 worth of in-kind support to various causes throughout the community in the year. And that's, you know, 5% of our total revenue or whatever it might be. But just try to put a figure on it, just so that it's not airy-fairy, like, oh, we did this really nice thing and gave a prize. Try to quantify it. And for all items, explain how doing this betters your business, and how, if you do, use that USP to, you know, to tell your customers why you're a good business or a better business than others. So, and if you don't do that, think about how you can. So, sorry to harp on about Cruise with Sundays, but they have a page on their website titled How We Care. And so they talk about how they care about the environment and the measures that they take to protect the environment. But they also talk about how they're a very involved sponsor in local events and how they're committed to, you know, helping the local community. So I'm not saying put a page on your website, but I'm just saying they use that as a marketing advantage over their competitors to show that they are an actual caring organisation in the region. So that's it for the individual categories. I just was going to talk overall about the submission. Probably the most important thing is beware the two-part questions. There is so many of them, and that's why having this document next to you the whole time is so important. You need to go back and go, what was the question again? There's so many of them that say, tell us about how you do this and show us your success. Or demonstrate is a really important word that they have in there regularly. So just refer back, refer back, refer back. And I was saying earlier to a group, make sure that every sentence you write in there relates back to answering the question. It's a 30-page submission, so it's really easy to just start going on and on, telling your story. Make sure you're going back and saying, is that sentence really answering that question or improving my answer here to answer that? So yeah, very important. Read the tips. The tips are there because judges have been pulling their hair out for years because people are not answering the question properly, and those tips are there because that's what they want to see. So if they say consider putting a map, put a map. If they say consider putting it in a table, do it in a table. Just do it how they say. That's what they want. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Consider telling us your goals, strategies and outcomes. Write your goals, strategies and outcomes, and just, you have to do it. It seems obvious, but you know, sometimes you can get so snowed under in doing these. So just, I guess the other thing I haven't written here, or no I have, allow generous time to prepare, because you can get carried away, and so you need to come back with a fresh mind and go, what was I thinking in that area? Or that question is just not answered at all. So you need to allow yourself time to go back and check against the criteria that you have answered it properly. Passion is something that they're really looking for. So this can go either way. You need to be really careful that you're not saying, I do this and this is why. You know, you can't be too casual with your language, but it needs to come across in your words. You can't treat this like a corporate document. So you need to be able to show that you are passionate. And I think the first speaker this morning spoke about being passionate about why you're in business. Try to relay that through your answers as to why you're even in business and why you get so much joy out of customers being satisfied.
Can I just say, you just said don't say the I, and yet then you just go with that and it's mainly the I. So
yeah, you've just got to be careful with the language. So even if you initially write it and say, you know, I this and I that, then go back later and just amend the wording so it's a little bit more professional. I just wouldn't tell it in the first person. I think you can say we or our, like our vision is this or our policy is that, but you just need to be careful not to say, so what I did was I then went and did this special process and then I did surveys. You need to say, so we implemented a strategic survey procedure or whatever it is. Yeah, so allow generous time to prepare. The first thing I do is go through all the questions and just brain dump the first thing that comes into my mind for each of those questions and just put it there, and then I go through and draft. The trick can be that you often start at question 1, and so by question 5 it's pretty terrible because you're sick of it. So you could, I think you were saying you've just decided to start on question 3. So just do question 3 straight for a week and then forget about question 3 and go to question 2, or however it works for you. Just be careful not to start at question 1 every time, because yeah, question 5 will be not so good. You don't need a professional graphic designer to do it. Great if you can. I mean, it looks beautiful if you can have it fully graphically designed, and if you have time and budget and inclination for that, then do it. But you know, if you're just low budget and doing it yourself, just a simple layout, you know, with pictures placed nicely, neatly into it, anything, you know, just make sure that it's easy to read, because they're reading it on a screen and they're reading 30 pages and they're reading 30 different submissions. So it needs to be well laid out. Obviously within the rules, I don't know if you're aware, they're very strict on spacing, font type, all those things. You could lose 1 point and that could see you just lose. So just the other document that needs to be the Bible for you. Speaking of the Bible, I tried to find it last night, and I don't know if they have one for this year's criteria given that it's changed, but last year they produced a 50-page document guide on writing an award-winning submission, and this document was definitely dog-eared by the end of me writing submissions last year. It was so useful. It went through every individual question and helped you individually answer those questions, like in way more detail than these tips give in this document. So I've emailed last year's document to Denise so that she can supply it to all of you guys. Even if they don't have one for this year, last year's will still help because the questions are still similar. So definitely have a read through it. It's huge, but it's so helpful. And hopefully, like I said, they've produced one for this year. And then my last bit of advice is, if you are entering the Whitsundays Awards, pretend like you're writing the submission for Queensland so that it forces you to think big. And if you're entering the Queensland Awards, because what happens is if you win, your submission automatically goes on to the Australian judges and you don't get a chance to review it. So the Australian judges are thinking from an Australian perspective. So you need to have written the submission, placing yourself as a operator within Australia. So when you're looking at your competitors, you need to position yourself against other Australian competitors or international competitors, because that's what the Australian judges, that's their mindset. So I always write submissions with Australian judges in mind, thinking Australian judges are going to be reading this. So, and if you're only writing at Whitsundays level, then pitch yourself at Queensland level so it shows that you do think big and that you do realise that you are competing at that bigger level. And I think that's it from me. I just had other notes written down here. In terms of photos and images, mix them up, maps, graphs, tables, have photos of your staff. You know, include photos that show your business in day-to-day operations. It doesn't just need to be beautiful brochure shots. So things that show the fact that the staff are there smiling to greet you as you board the boat every day, or that the staff are there, you know, offering an older lady a helping hand, or whatever it might be. Show those action shots that actually show that your business is working. Last year we even included a screenshot of an employment ad that Cruise Whitsundays ran, because we were saying that Cruise Whitsundays is picky with their staff, and that the ad was worded to say, we're looking for deckhands, but basically we're looking for people that are passionate about going to the reef every day and that love showing people the Great Barrier Reef. If you don't have the skills, we can train you for that. Don't worry about that, but we employ for attitude. And so we put a screenshot of the ad proving that that's even how we write our ads. So things like that to, you know, really add value to the words that you're putting in the submission. I think that's enough talking from me. Thank you.